Good evening, good morning. Welcome in daily UPSC editorial audio program. Don't fan this flame. The Times of India. No exemption. Marital rape is rape. No, not other crime. Not another crime. The Economic Times. Cast in jail. The Hindu. Now the full editorials. Don't fan this flame. The Times of India. US must stop Israel from targeting Iranian oil. With Iran's missile attack on Israel this week, there is little doubt Tel Aviv will retaliate. While US has ruled about Israel shrinking Iran's nuclear facilities, there is now talk of a hit on Iranian oil producing infra. That would be a disastrous in a different way. Washington must do everything in its power to restrain Tel Aviv from targeting Iranian oil. Huge provocation. Hitting Iranian oil infra would be a huge escalation, for Iran may choose to retaliate by targeting oil shipments from the Persian Gulf. That itself could drag countries like UAE and Saudi Arabia into the conflict. Plus, Iran, despite sanctions, pumps out about 2 million barrels of crude a day, or 2% of global supply. A hit on this production will see crude prices jump given that oil trade is given by global market dynamics. In fact, Brent crude has already crossed $78 a barrel from $71 a barrel before Iran's missile attack. Bad for India. Countries like India that rely on oil and gas imports from the Gulf will suffer if Iran disrupts this route. Also, oil is traded on forward contracts. These will go on a toss in case of wider war. The knock-on effects for these economies will be considerable. Additionally, India has a huge diaspora in Gulf Arab states. A wider regional conflict may necessitate emergency evacuation. Biden's final test. Hitherto, US has been unable or unwilling to rein in Netanyahu. There are now reports that Hezbollah and Israel has agreed to a US-France ceasefire before Nasrullah was killed. If that's true, Biden can be accused of being a lame duck president. That's that's certainly not the legacy he wants, and many Democrats are privately upset with Israel. The least Biden can do is not let Netanyahu cause any more major damage. No exemption. Government of India's marital rape affidavit is problematic. Given Times of India editorial, given BNSS retained the marital rape exemption that decriminalizes spousal rape when it updated the Indian Penal Code. Government of India's affidavit to Supreme Court against its removal is on expected lines. Broadly, Government of India's arguments are: number one, sex within marriage is based on reciprocal conjugal rights incomparable to ideas of consent. Second, removing the exception would interfere with the institution of marriage. And three, remedies exist such as in the law against domestic violence to deal with non-consensual sex between spouses. In its landmark 2017 privacy judgment, Supreme Court was unambiguous about sexual autonomy. It clearly linked it to dignity and privacy. An individual's fundamental right to privacy is not one any aspect of the relationship of marriage can impinge upon. Until this judgment, the idea of privacy in Indian law would cease and desist at the threshold of the union of marriage. Thus, privacy tended to be used more as a cover to deny married women their rights, perpetuating ideas of humor, duty, and shame. The privacy judgment placed the individual at the heart of the law, thus turning privacy into an empowering tool for all women, including married ones. The belief that non-consensual sex within marriage is in some way different from non-consensual sex outside marriage is premised on an archaic view that marriage renders women their husband's property. This goes against every tenet Government of India professes, as it reiterated in its affidavit. Empowerment of women from economic freedom to safe mobility is core policy. Government of India bets for women's freedom of choice that would include her right to decline sexual activity. Government of India also argues consent within a marriage is for legis- legislature to decide upon. What Supreme Court is doing what Supreme Court is doing is deciding upon the unconstitutionality of the said provision. It is in fact the court's job to do so. Marital rape is rape, not another crime. The Economic Times. Rape, as defined by the Section 375 of IPC, is defined as sexual intercourse of any kind with a woman against her will, without her consent, when consent has been obtained by putting her in fear of death or of hurt, and six other circumstances, including inability to communicate consent. Two things in this law, carried over and expanded in the Bharatiya Nyaya Sanhita BNS Section 63, are noteworthy. One, it doesn't apply to rape of a man or a transgender. The scrapped IPC Section 377 treated any sexual act, consensual or not, between men or with a transgender as criminal. This is a serious lacuna. This is a serious lacuna. Two, it doesn't qualify the woman whether married or single, divorced or separated, tall or short, etc. Government of India's attempt to keep marital rape when a husband rapes his rapes his wife outside the purview of BNS Section 63 2013 amendments to IPC opted to retain the exemption from Section 375, retains an unjust qualifier for a woman who is a rape victim and who is not. Rape is rape and is a victim of rape. A victim of rape, something that's for a court of law to prove. The veracity of Government of India is neither a marriage counselor nor is its job to uphold the sanctity of matrimony across the land. It's in fact dangerous to corral marital rape into the fence of lesser crimes of IPC sections 354, assault to outrage modesty, 354A, sexual harassment, 354B, forced dis, disrobing, 498A, cruelty to a woman by husband or her relatives, and Protection of Women from Domestic Violence Act 2005. Rape is none of these, the same way a murder is not assault, injury, etc. If the murder of a married woman is the same crime as the murder of an unmarried woman, the same logic must hold for rape. This is not about upholding marriage, it is about criminalizing rape. Caste in jail. The Hindu. Time for state governments to end systemic discrimination in prisons. The most notable aspect of Supreme Court ruling prohibiting caste-based discrimination in the treatment of prisoners is that it is required a judgment from the highest court to end colonial practices and systems in prisons. While the court has dealt elaborately with specific rules in the jail manuals of various states and the way in which caste-based hierarchy plays a role in allocation of duties, classification of prisoners, and the treatment of certain social groups as habitual offenders. It is quite remarkable that uh, that prison authorities and state governments had done so little about these aspects since independence. It is as if the prison system has been out of the reach of the core philosophy of the constitution, the the ushering in of an equal society, the ending of all form of discrimination, the prohibition of untouchability in any form, and the abolition of the abolition of forced labor and exploitation. Responding to journalist Sukanya Santa's writ petition, the court has analyzed the controversial rules and practices in jails in the backdrop of these constitutional objectives. It has ruled such provisions unconstitutional and directed the revision of prison manuals within 3 months. Tracing the history of such rules and practices, the court had noted with much justification, in line with their overall approach, the colonial administrators. It had ruled such provisions unconstitutional and directed the revision of prison manuals within 3 months. Tracing the history of such rules and practices, the court had noted with much justification, in line with their overall approach, the colonial administrators linked caste with prison administrator of labor, food, and treatment of prisoners. Not only were menial work and supposedly polluting occupations allocated to prisoners from communities placed lower in the caste hierarchy, some were expected to carry out their hereditary trades within prisons. The court found, on the other hand, the caste privileges of a few placed higher were preserved. Few can disagree with the observation that the notion that an occupation is considerable as degrading or menial is an aspect of the caste system and untouchability. The provision that food must be cooked by prisoners from a suitable caste, and rules that refer to those from the scavenger class being assigned tasks such as manual scavenging, sweeping, and cleaning, violated the constitutional prohibition against untouchability. Distribution of labor cannot be solely based on birth. Such rules violate the right to dignity and the right against forced labor and exploitation. The court has also favored doing away with vague definitions of habitual offenders, as they seem to ascribe criminal tendencies to whole tribes. Even though the idea of notifying criminal tribes has long been given up, it is time for state governments to respond to the verdict and revisit their laws and regulations related to prison administration, and put an end to systemic discrimination in an institution that may treat any form of resistance as indiscipline. Thank you.